Before I ordered my CYBER Gadget Retro Freak console, I knew that people were going to want to know just how it compared to the Hyperkin Retron 5. That's the purpose for this video. I did avoid talking about the Retron 5 as much as I possibly could in the review and the unboxing of the Retro Freak, and despite some obvious glaring differences between the two, they are actually quite similar. I'm not going to get into any tech specs or anything like that. This is more from the player's perspective. And without any further ado, let's just get into the comparison. If you're unfamiliar with how either of these consoles work, they use emulation software to run the games from the cartridge. You plug a game in, the console loads the data from the cartridge, and then you can play it. The only difference in this is that the Retro Freak has the option to save the ROM data to a micro SD card or internal storage, enabling you to play the game without having to use the cartridge every time. Both of these consoles are very user-friendly and have easy to read and navigate user interfaces. The menus on the Retron 5 are all very easy to read, and many features are organized on different menus, which has a very clean look. On the Retro Freak, the user interface is a bit more compact, and while not quite as easy to read, it has most of its features right on the main screen, and other menus will pop up depending on what you want to do. Being emulation-based consoles, both can do a lot of similar things with the games they play. You can add scan lines and filters and such, and make some adjustments to the sound EQ. All features which are neat, but I never really play with them. I do think they are all very nice to have. One nice thing that the Retro Freak does is when you're choosing your visual tweaks, it shows you a little image of their mascot character, a 16-bit style sprite to give you an example of the visual effects. It's a pretty nice touch. Both games will let you choose a filter either before you start playing or in a menu you can pull up as you play. Both consoles output video at 720p HD and use an HDMI output, so the games all look great either way. The biggest difference between the two consoles is what systems they're both able to play. Both consoles have 5 cartridge slots. NES, Genesis, Super Nintendo, Famicom, and Game Boy Advance on the Retron 5, and Famicom, Mega Drive, Super Famicom, Game Boy Advance, and PC Engine on the Retro Freak. Both consoles can play all region versions of the games, and backwards compatibility is intact for the GBA slot, and with a special adapter you can play Master System games on the Retron 5. There is an adapter coming out in May for the Retro Freak which will make it able to play Sega Mark III, Game Gear, Sega SG-1000, and Sega MyCard games through the Retro Freak. I've also used a power-based mini adapter to play some Master System games on the Retro Freak, but it doesn't quite work as well as it does on the Retron 5. I assume that is due to some hardware differences between the Mark III and the Master System. Also, the Retro Freak's PC Engine slot will also play Super Graphics games. You have a Retron 5 out of the box. It can play the games of 9 different consoles, counting the international variants of 2 of the slots. If you have a power-based adapter, you can add 1 more game, making for a total of 10 games you can play with the Retron 5. And with the Retro Freak, it can play 11 consoles right out of the box. If you get that adapter that's coming out for the Sega slot, that will add the games of 3 more consoles. If you have a 60-pin to 72-pin adapter, you can take that Famicom slot and play NES games on it. So we're talking about over 15 consoles playable on the Retro Freak. If you've seen my review of the Retro Freak, I said that the console is not very picky as to where it gets its game ROMs from, meaning that you can play the ROMs loaded to the micro SD card under dubious means, as some of us like to call it. This makes for a huge advantage over the Retron 5, and this does include the games which require an adapter in order to read the cartridges. Perhaps there are some compatibility issues with games on both of these consoles, but when it comes down to emulation, which is basically reverse engineering these ROMs to work in other hardware, it can't be an easy task, especially with the great number of games that both of these consoles can play. In my opinion, one of the biggest advantages the Retron 5 has over the Retro Freak is that out of the box, you can use the original game controllers from the different systems on Hyperkin's offering. It has ports for NES, Genesis, and Super Nintendo controllers, and also is compatible with a variety of Bluetooth controllers as well. That said, the wireless controller that comes with the Retron 5 does leave quite a bit to be desired. On the other hand, the included wired controller that comes with the Retro Freak is not perfect, but it is a much more traditionally styled controller than what the Retron 5 has given us. There is a premium version of the Retro Freak that does include an adapter for the original controllers, and other USB controller adapters will work, but it's not quite as convenient as being able to plug in a Genesis or an NES controller right into the console. So despite the weird choice of a stock controller with the Retron 5, it definitely wins a point this round for being able to use the original console's controllers. The last comparison I'd like to get into on this would have to be the price point, and we have a clear winner in the Retron 5. The Retron 5 will cost you anywhere between $125 and $150, depending on where you look. You might even be able to find it cheaper. GameStop briefly had pre-orders on this for under $100, but they are now asking $140 for that. On the other hand, the Retro Freak console, you have to ship this from Asia depending on where you get it. Amazon's asking for the standard, I think, $195. And PlayAsia says it's $169.99 plus shipping for the standard version. There is also the premium version, which costs $200 plus shipping from PlayAsia. You might be able to do a little better if you look eBay or something like that, but still, it's quite a price difference between this and this. In the end, which of these two consoles is truly the best is highly subjective. One may suit your needs better than the other. Also, one may suit your budget much better than the other. If you want to just play your old games, some people might prefer the Retron 5 for that. Others, you know, there's a lot more of an experimental kind of feel to the Retro Freak, and some may go for that. Personally, I like the Retro Freak a little bit more, but then again, you may feel differently. Hope you've enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time. Take care.